And I just turned around and I hauled ass out of there. I was done. I wasn't dealing with that.
The hypocrisy of the cult is one of the things that turned me away the quickest.
When I turned my headlights on, it turned and looked at us, and one of the things I remember the most were the eyes were glowing red.
I see an orb of light. It is just circling these steps like it is waiting for me.
And he begins to tell them that he saw a UFO. They're basically like, what are you talking about? That's 7 foot up on a tree, peeking around it, and that's where I saw the top of the muzzle, nose, and the eyes. As soon as I made eye contact with this thing, it felt like death.
Welcome back to Tinfoil Tales. I'm your host, Brandon Wright. Whether this is your first time checking out Tinfoil Tales or if you're a seasoned listener, just know I appreciate you guys and appreciate everything that you do for the show. Tonight's episode, we're going to be joined by my guest, Jeanette. Jeanette is a local Indiana resident. She had a weird sighting back in 2001 involving a large canine creature. And then she also had a recent one here just a few weeks ago that happened to be on 2 legs. So I'm definitely looking forward to talking with her, especially when it comes into upright walking canids. Right up in my alley there for what I look into. But before we bring Jeanette on, if you've ever had an experience or a story you'd like to share and you would like to be on an episode of Tinfoil Tales, there's a couple things you can do. You can either go to tinfoiltales.com and go to the contact section, or you can send an email to tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com. Either way works for me, so just make sure to get a message to me, and we will get something scheduled for a future episode. If you would like to help the podcast out, please share it around. Word of mouth helps the podcast grow, finds new guests. You can also help out by leaving a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen to Tinfoil Tales at. So just click the 5 stars and it helps me fight the algorithms. If you're like me and you don't like hearing all the ads on the episodes, I have no say in the matter when it comes to that, but it helps keep the podcast floating as part of the agreement I have with my hosting service. So I got to do what I got to do. But that is why I have a Patreon for $1.99 a month. You get early access to all the episodes and they're all ad free. There's also exclusive content over there. So if you don't want to hear the ads, but you want to help me out, please check out the Patreon. You can find more information about that in the show notes. You can also follow me around on social medias, Facebook and Instagram. Look for Brandon Tinfoil Tales on Facebook or the official Facebook page. But now we're going to go ahead and bring Jeanette on. Definitely looking forward to talking with her, especially when it comes into the Indiana stuff. She's not too far away from where I'm at. It falls in line with what I've been researching and what I've been trying to make a documentary about. So definitely looking forward to talking to her. And I hope you guys enjoy our conversation. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. I'd like to take this time to welcome my guest tonight, Jeanette. Thanks for coming on here and talking to me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Would you like to let the audience know a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm a single mom. I have 2 sons, grown sons, and live in Frankfort, Indiana. Have 2 dogs, 3 cats. I'm a nurse by profession. Been doing that for 16 years, I guess. Prior to that, I was social worker. And that's kind of most recent history, I suppose. That's about all I can think of.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
You reached out to me several months ago, and I've been so busy. We've been trying to get something set up here, but with you being local to Indiana, it really, and not too far from where I'm at, I'm here in Miami County, so we're only about maybe 45 minutes away from each other. But you had a very interesting encounter that always, when someone says they've seen an upright walking canine, it always makes me want to listen because
Right.
it hits close home to me because that is something that I've always been interested in now since I've had my experience. And for me, I've been looking into some of the things around here, a lot of the weird stuff that goes on around at least Miami County. But you being in an adjacent county, it's not like these things are only in one area.
Right.
I actually just talked to someone about a week and a half ago in Crawfordville, but they were from Lafayette. And
Crawfordsville's not far from me.
right. And they saw one in 2006.
Okay.
They said it walked across the street and hopped over a guardrail.
Wow. Yep.
I asked if they wanted to come on the show, but they didn't. So just not a whole lot to talk about. That's just kind of their thing. They didn't want to be out there, but she told me what happened. So I was like, okay, well, I
Yeah.
appreciate that. So,
Yeah.
but there's definitely a lot of those stories around here. So if you would like to begin with yours, you can go right ahead.
hmm Well, I'll start with the older one
Okay.
from what it was around 2001. And the reason I know that is because that was the year that I stopped doing social work. It was when I changed, and I stayed home with my kids and for a few years. And my son at the time would have been a little over 2 years old. And we were driving early one morning, and I know it was some appointment associated with him, like a doctor's appointment or something. I can't remember the details of that, but we were out early one morning driving from Frankfurt to Lafayette, and that took me on the road that I took through Mulberry. And as we were entering the town or coming close to the town, there were farm fields pretty much on both sides. But on the left, just on the edge of town, was the new library that had been built for that town. And it was one of those misty spring mornings where there's a lot of mist over the fields. I mean, it was clear. I could see on the roads. It wasn't like it was foggy, but there was that mist hanging over the fields. One of those days. And as I approached Mulberry on my right-hand side, I saw a large creature eating roadkill. And it was so large that it made me slow down to get a good look at it. And the thing that struck me too was the ditch. A ditch on the side of the road is fairly expansive, but it looked like its hindquarters were balanced on the side of the ditch closer to the field, and its front was up by the road. I mean, it was just huge. And I just slowed down. And as I looked to my right, as I got closer, it lifted its head, and it looked like a wolf. And it had a huge mane, a lot of fur around its face, and it was just, as I told you earlier, I was in a Bonneville, so that gives you an idea of the window on the passenger side. It just looked like it could just fill that window with the size of its head. It was massive. The first thing that went through my mind was, I'm glad I'm in a car because I've got my son in the back seat. I was frightened in that sense, but not, I knew I was safe because I was in a car. I could get away easily. But, and just, I was more curious, dumbfounded. What the heck is that? What could it be? And with the job that I did as in social work, I interacted with a local law enforcement. And later on, like a week later or so, I was in a meeting with the deputy sheriff for that town. And I asked him if he knew if there were wolves around Mulberry. His response was no. He asked me why I asked that question. I told him what I saw. And he said, you probably saw a coyote. And I said, no, I know what a coyote looks like. This was way bigger than a coyote. Coyotes aren't that big. I have a standard poodle who's 75 pounds, which is probably the size of a large coyote. This animal was huge. So, and I've wondered about that for years. But of course, you put it out of your mind as time goes by. That was several years ago. But, and then in recent years, when I've heard things about dogmen, I've often wondered if that's what I actually saw. So that's that encounter. And then here recently, I was walking my dogs. I have another small dog here in Frankfurt, And a few blocks from my house, I was at a fairly large corner of streets that go into a neighborhood. And I was walking away from the corner towards my house, and a car was going by the other way. And as it hit that intersection, it it's a stop sign, but it slammed on its brakes suddenly. And it made me turn around. And when I looked, I saw what looked like a dog on upright running across the street, and more of a silhouette. There was a light there, but it still was late at night. I walk the dogs by myself late at night. I'm not worried about that. But this was not a human. That car slammed on its brakes for a reason, and it had the hocks of dog legs. And as I told you earlier, what went through my mind was the image of the werewolf in Harry Potter. That same stance, the same curve of the hunching look of the upper back and the hocks of the legs, and it ran across that street very quickly. But I saw it, and the thing that interested me too was my dogs. If they see something, they bark. If they see another person at night, they bark. They were silent. It's like they weren't going to draw any attention to themselves. As myself, I was just, I was silent too. And I just, as soon as it passed, I grabbed my dogs and said, "We're going home." And we hustled home. So, there's something out there, but that's basically my experiences in a nutshell.
I was going to ask a couple questions about the first one,
Sure.
and then we can talk about the second one.
Uh-huh.
The first one, you said you saw it eating.
Yes, I did.
Could you tell what it was actually eating, what the actual roadkill was?
I didn't get enough look at that, and I just know it was large enough that it wasn't. I mean, we have a lot of raccoons.
Mm-hmm.
Could be a possum. I don't know, but it did when it brought its head up. There was blood in its teeth, and I saw its teeth, and those were not coyote teeth. I can tell you that. That was startling. It's like, oh my God,
What side of the road was it on when you were driving? Was it on your passenger side or your driver's side?
Passenger side. It was on my right-hand side.
So what did it do when you drove past it?
It brought its head up because I was going really slow at that point.
It didn't try and run off or anything, so it wasn't even afraid?
No, it just looked right at me. It brought its head up and looked in my window. I mean, it was big enough that it was looking in my window. And that was like, whoa.
For me, I think if it was a normal coyote type of an animal, it would have ran off scared at the headlights.
Yeah, it was it was unfettered by me. Didn't care. It just,
I've heard from several people that these things actually don't eat, but then I've heard it's just like what you just told me. Like there's been times they've been seen eating roadkill. So what is it? Do they eat things or they don't eat things? Why would they be pretending to eat things if they're not actually eating it?
I've heard that too, and because in the last couple of years, as I told you, I've listened to some other podcast about it, and that's when it kind of confirmed that what I saw was not normal. There is a basis for it. And yes, I've heard people say that they don't eat, that there's some kind of ethereal thing. No, I think they're flesh and blood, and they're going to eat. Yeah, I'm sure they eat. Of course they do. I'm not, and I've heard people say, "Oh, I have a spiritual connection." I've heard podcasts where people say, "Yeah, I have a spiritual connection with these animals. I feel totally safe around them." I don't take that very seriously. If I encountered one of these face to face and I wasn't in a car knowing I could get away, you can better believe I'm going to be intimidated and afraid.
That's the thing I think other people say they want too. And that's what I've been told about some of my stuff is they want that fear because that's what they actually feed on.
Right. Yeah.
I've heard stuff where people claim that these things have tapped on their windows
Mm-hmm.
and they've done the whole mind speak stuff to them, which is very reminiscent of what you hear with Sasquatch people when they've had
Yeah.
encounters too.
And that could
But
be. That could be. I mean, I don't deny that, but I'm not going to, just, yeah, I'm not going to go out looking for them. Um, for some reason, I encounter them, uh,
I'm
or
the
I've had these sightings, and uh, people, you're probably going to be more likely to see them if you're out in the country a lot, out in the woods a lot. But they come into town. I think they do. I think I saw one. This one, last one I saw was late September, I think, maybe mid to late September. It was pretty recent, and uh, there's nothing to stop them from coming into towns. I mean, there's wooded areas all around Frankfurt, so it could very easily happen. Um, but yeah, I'm not going to go out looking for them.
no, that's what I'm about to start doing. So
Yeah, well, I'd be prepared if I did, but you hear about two people that go hunting them, trying to kill them. I'm not going to do that. I'm curious as to why you're hearing more about them. It seems like more people see them. It's kind of comforting to me because, I just kind of blew it off over the years. I thought, well, you know, nobody seems to know anything about this. They're telling me it's a coyote. I don't believe that. Um, I know coyotes aren't that big. Um, but
did you happen to get a
yeah,
good look at its paws or anything, or just basically the face?
just the face. I mean, it was, busy eating.
Hmm.
I didn't see it. What I did see was the huge body. I mean, the fact that it could extend its body over the ditch like that.
Did it have a
You know,
tail?
I don't remember. It probably did, but I didn't see the details of it.
That's the
Um,
other weird thing that I've noticed. If you hear a lot of people's like encounter stories, they claim that it didn't have a tail, which
I've heard that too. Yeah, but then there's people that say they do
right. The
see
thing I
tails.
saw had a big bushy tail,
Hmm.
which I didn't know at the time that was a thing that they didn't have tails, but I was like, well, this did.
Yeah, yeah.
I think there's more than one sort of, I guess, dogman. I don't like saying dogman to be honest, but that is basically what they've been called.
What they've been pegged to be. Yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah. There probably is. It seems like there's some that are furry and some that aren't so furry. Like the one that I saw, back in 2001, it had a lot of fur around its head and neck. It was very furry, a lot of hair, if you will. Um, it was very thick and full, and hair, and it's kind of up on the back of its head too. I mean, I saw that as I approached it, that it had like the mane kind of thing, and then, but the one I saw in September of this year was not so much. I didn't see a lot of fur around it. Um, so, you know, it was just a silhouette. It was more like the thing you saw in Harry Potter, the werewolf. It was kind of almost like it had been shaved. Um, but the silhouette and the stance of the legs, that was not a human, you know. And I feel validated too, but by the fact that that car slammed on its brakes. It had gone past the stop sign. It had stopped, and then as it took off or started to drive, it saw this thing like I did, and it slammed on its brakes enough that I heard the slamming of the brakes. Um, and to not hit it, and also they probably were like, "What the heck is that?" Like I did. But one of the stories that interests me that I am more inclined to think that there's some type of experimentation going on with these creatures, um, like mutations, I don't know. Because one of the encounters I listened to, and I've listened to this one probably 3 times because I'm so fascinated by what this person saw when the guy was driving through Joshua Tree in California. And he saw like a group of them literally running in formation through that park in the middle of the night. And his description of them is pretty diverse. I mean, there was a bunch of them, and and there's a lot of it. There's a lot of strange things that go on in California with government experiments, and I listen to a lot of things about that too. So that kind of made me that I often think that it's products of experimentation with animals and mutations genetically. I would say that's a plausible thing going on in our world today. Why? I don't know.
It wouldn't really surprise me one way or the other.
Yeah. Yeah.
The thing with me, though, is there's been reports from these things for thousands of years.
True. Which that kind of negates that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've had
yeah,
the werewolf trials.
Werewolf.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then the ancient Egyptians had a god that was a Anubis, but he was basically a jackal-headed person.
Sure.
And there's been stories of there was supposedly a tribe of these things somewhere. I don't remember if it was India or somewhere in that area, but it was over somewhere on the other continent.
Well, I've never heard of that. That's interesting.
There was a tribe of them.
Huh.
Again, I don't know if any of this stuff is real when it comes to like the old stories or whatever, but that's just stuff that I've come across trying to dig up stuff.
Well, yeah, and there's certainly a lot of people having some pretty interesting. I mean, people are seeing them, and that's it was like I said, a comfort to me when I first encountered some of the podcasts, not yours, but I've heard some of yours recently, or some of the stuff from you. I think I heard you interviewed on something, possibly. I can't remember how I first encountered you, but I've listened to Dogman encounters, and I've listened to the stories people tell and their experiences. People are seeing these more and more. And at least they're feeling more comfortable talking about it. Because a lot of people get poo-hooed. You didn't see that, you're imagining things. Fortunately, I have family that doesn't do that to me. But there's something going on out there, and like same with Sasquatch, And I grew up in Missouri, and in Missouri they called Sasquatch Momo the monster. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but people talked about it all the time. And my father's family was from the Appalachians, and I spent a good part of my childhood there. Spent summers there a lot, parts of my summers, and and that was out in the mountains. And I remember my father saying, you don't want to go out in those mountains, spend too much time in those mountains at night because there's things out there you don't want to encounter by yourself. It was just kind of a given. You just don't do that unless you know what you're doing. So I don't discount people's experiences and what's out there. So
I try and remain somewhat skeptical because I think I have to in order to keep some sort of balance.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because there's always going to be people out there that want to just make stuff up, and I don't understand the desire to do that. I don't either. No. It ruins it for people that actually have real experiences, I think. But again, there's no way of detecting someone that's real or sincere or whatever. But I think majority of the people I talk with, I try to give the benefit of the doubt.
Right.
And I've been doing a lot of research here. I say quote unquote research, but I've been trying to find people around my area that have had
Mm-hmm.
experiences. And I actually was talking to someone yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
and they were fishing along the Wabash River east of Peru.
Mm-hmm.
And this was back in 2022, so 2 years ago, actually.
Yeah, not long.
They heard some sound like coyotes yip, and then they heard a very loud, deep howl type thing, and their
Mm-hmm.
dogs kind of like freaked out by it.
Mm-hmm.
And he said the hair stood up on the back of his neck. And then as they were walking back, he actually has photos and he's sent them to me. He's got his normal dog's footprint, which is a 60-pound dog that he had, a husky. And then there's
Mm-hmm.
another large print next to it. And the large print is a lot bigger than the husky print. And
Wow.
he said
Yeah.
the thing that about it to him that was odd is it appeared to be just a set of footprints walking, not
Mm-hmm.
4 footprints, but just two.
Not. Yeah.
So,
Right.
and he's not necessarily a dog man or something like that type believer per se, or looked into stuff like that. Like he just was out fishing
Mm-hmm.
and heard something and came across this. So that's kind of got what, like, he started looking into kind of things too, because he doesn't know what would have made that. He doesn't necessarily believe Dogman are real, but he doesn't understand why the tracks look like that. And the tracks, like I said, like the photos, they're really big. But
Right. Right.
for me, the interesting part about this is the location.
Mm-hmm.
He sent me the location of where it happened. Just a couple weeks later, not even like a mile away, someone reported seeing a Bigfoot.
Hmm.
I said, I wonder if they actually saw a Bigfoot or if they saw whatever this thing was, because it was literally like
Right.
maybe a 2 week time frame,
Right.
literally right in the same area. Well, I've
Mhm.
also been digging into things, and it seems to be I've pinpointed the exact location to 2 different people have had encounters what they claim were werewolves.
Mm-hmm.
So I have that
Yeah.
mapped out. I actually have the X on it on my map here. And
Mm-hmm.
I know someone else that lives in the area and they have weird stuff happening around their place, where they at least
Mm-hmm.
feel like there's something weird, and they're in that same general area. And there's also been Bigfoot sightings in that area. So for some reason, this little area, it's basically where the Wabash River and the Mississinawa River connect.
Well, and that makes sense. I mean, it's a water source, and it's a good place for animals like that to. And if there's a lot of wooded areas around there
Hmm.
as well, it's easy for them to hang out.
If
I
you
mean,
follow, if you follow the river, the Mississinawa River up to the dam, because we have the Mississinawa Reservoir,
mm-hmm.
there is an area through there called Okefenokee, and a lot of people had weird experiences out there too. Not so much like with Dogman type things, but there's been reports of Bigfoot, and there's a lot of like weird paranormal supernatural stuff that go on out there.
Right, right, right.
So it's like this whole little area has a lot of high strangeness activity going on. I
Yeah.
had someone send me a UFO video back in June over the same exact
Mhm.
location of where I've put this X at.
Interesting. And I've seen UFOs too. But
There was
it's funny. I've seen those believe it or not, in Indianapolis. I'm always in Indianapolis when I see them.
there was some in Frankfurt about a month ago. Did you happen to
Oh,
see
really?
those? There was three
No.
orbs. There was 3 orbs that came from Frankfurt area up through Kokomo up through my area. There was 3 orange
Missed
orbs.
that.
There was 2 sets of them. So
Hmm.
there's actually 6 lights that were flying in a pattern.
Wow.
I saw several different videos. My sister-in-law and my niece saw it. That she actually called my wife to tell her about it, to tell
I'd
me.
like to see that.
My aunt and uncle were out trying to videotape it. My other uncle actually saw it, didn't realize what it was.
Mm-hmm.
So I know several family members, obviously, that have seen it. And that was,
Mhm.
I think it was October 7th. So
Wow.
not very far, or not very
No,
long
it's
ago.
not far back. Yeah. And I've seen orbs, but like I said, I was always over in Indianapolis. I was driving into Indianapolis and I'd see it. And of course, you're in the interstate and you can't stop and take a picture. But I'd see them, and they hang in the sky and um, the one I saw that was most striking was it was a larger orb, and then it kind of split into like four or five, and then the original one kind of just sat there, and the other ones that split off, it just kind of went around it, and then they all came together again, and it took off. And it was as I was driving on 65 and just coming off. You drive down 65 into Indy, and it's the exit. You either go on to 465 or you stay on 65 into the city.
Right.
And that's because I used to work at Methodist Hospital, and that's exactly how you go in. And I'm driving along there, and I see all those, see it up in the sky. And I worked nights there, but I was going in for like a training, so it was daytime. And I thought, I can't believe I'm seeing this. It's like, I wish I could talk to the other drivers. Do you see this? Do you see that? But of course, you can't do that. Can't take a picture, and it's very distinctive. And I've seen that happen twice. And then coming out of Indianapolis one evening, I'm a yoga instructor, or I was. I'm not active now, but I was doing a training for my yoga certification, and I was coming out of Indianapolis on Michigan Road at night. The training was an evening event, and I was coming home. It was dark, and it was near the art museum. I don't know if you know how Indianapolis is laid out. There's a university there, a religious university. I can't remember what it's called, but it's right across the museum on 30 or Michigan Road. And I was a little ways down the road, and there's kind of a spot where there's not a lot of buildings. It's a lot of trees. And I'm driving along, and it was a clear night. I could see the stars. It wasn't real cloudy or anything, but then all of a sudden it was very, very dark. And I looked out my window and looked, like through my front window, and it was like the sky just had disappeared. And then I saw the lights like on it was a triangle, and the lights on the points of a triangle lit up, and it was just hovering above me. And then it slowly took off, and then it was gone. And then I saw the stars again. I thought, this is so weird, and I couldn't, what can you do? It's dark. There's no way I'm going to get a picture of this. And, I wasn't going to stop my car. It was enough because I thought about it. I thought, should I stop my car and get a good look at this? But it really was no place for me to stop. There was no turnoffs or anything on that little stretch right before you get to where the businesses and shopping areas, or not shopping areas, but strips of stores and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's more lit. But I know what I thought. So I've seen those things, and so I don't, when people tell me things that they've seen, I don't discount them, but I don't really talk about it to many people. I've told my kids, and they believe me. They think it's interesting. But yeah, something's definitely out there. And as far as, people say, well, like with Sasquatch, well, why hasn't somebody seen it? You think we'd see them more? Well, they're not going to make themselves visible that much. It seems, my impression of the Dogmen, or whatever you want to call them, they seem intelligent. So they're not going to show up in town in broad daylight. They're going to show up in town at night. Or if they come into town for whatever reason, like little towns like mine, it's a small town, they're not going to like make themselves known in broad daylight, and they're going to live in the woods. And when you think of the number of people, very few people really go into the woods to do whatever. Hunters go out into the woods. Of course, fishermen, like the man you talked to who went fishing.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't really get out into the woods much. I did as a kid growing up in Missouri. I was in the woods all the time. I mean, we lived, the woods were the wooded, lots of woods. That was my backyard. I walked out and I went hiking to the creek and out. So I was out there all the time as a kid. But here, and you go to your day-to-day life, you go to work, you do what you do, you take care of your house, if you have children, your pets, whatever. You're not getting out into the woods. Very few of us really do that. So we don't see what's going on out there, As like my dad told me in the mountains of North Carolina, you don't go out in those woods at night unless you know what you're doing. And, you just don't go out alone. There's things out there you don't want to encounter. That's probably what he was talking about. So, that's their place. It's not necessarily where we hang out. Not in our modern society anyway. So
I've noticed there's been a correlation with people that have had encounters with a Bigfoot or a Dogman or a cryptid or whatever.
mm-hmm.
They've usually had an experience with a UFO. They've usually seen a UFO.
Yeah, I've seen them.
They've also typically had some weird paranormal supernatural encounter.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost as if once you have one experience, it makes you open to more. And right. I don't know what the one is that actually triggers it, but there's one that always stands out that makes you start noticing. Because I think we all have experiences throughout life, but for the most part, I think we all just typically ignore them.
Yeah, you ignore them or you rationalize them. You reason them out of your mind.
Mm-hmm.
Or you don't want to. I think a lot of people just, if they do have experiences, they're afraid to talk about it. They're afraid of being belittled by others. I think that's an issue. And they don't want to believe it themselves. It's easier just to negate it. However you go about negating it, you just do that. And like the first time I saw that, which I now would call a Dogman, at the time I didn't know what to call it. I just called it a big wolf. But now that I've heard more about this, other people encountering things like this, so I do see. It has to have been a Dogman. It was not a wolf, and it was way too big, and it's I believe what I saw, but for all those years though, I just thought, well, maybe I just didn't know what it was. I didn't know what. I couldn't get validation of any type, so I just kind of like, well, I saw something, and I just kind of went about my life, It's
hard to rationalize when you're seeing something like that, and you don't.
Yeah.
Your mind doesn't go right to the fact that this is something weird. Even if it is weird and it's weird, you try and write it off as being normal. Right.
There has to be some, yeah.
Even when your normal explanation is worse than just admitting that you saw something weird.
Yeah, right. I saw something that was not a wolf. I've heard of more, the normal wolves are becoming more, prevalent in our country. But I hadn't. That was my question to that law enforcement officer. Do we have wolves coming into Indiana now? And he said, oh, no. And I told him what I saw, and he said, oh, you just saw a coyote. Well, like I said, that was no coyote. The color was wrong. The size was wrong. I mean, coyotes just look like leggy dogs. They're not that big.
No, they're not even like, I have a golden doodle that's a puppy. He's about 6 months old. And then I have an all-white German Shepherd. And she's 4 years old. I think she's a pretty big dog,
Right.
but I saw a coyote dead on the side of the road the other day,
Hmm.
and I'm like, they're not as big as you think they are.
They're not that big. No.
No.
I mean, I think that the biggest they get is about 75 pounds, and my standard poodle is 75 pounds.
Hmm.
Um, and that's, it's a good sized dog, but, and I've had bigger dogs than him, but I've always had big dogs. But, you know, that's a big coyote. A 75-pound coyote is a big coyote. They're usually not that big. I actually kind of looked into that. I mean, they usually top out at about 60 pounds. They're not that big. And they're leggy and scrawny looking. This
Wolves
was not as
are
fun.
actually bigger, but
Right.
I'm not going to say there aren't wolves around here because I know for sure that people do have hybrids. So
Right.
that doesn't mean one of them hasn't gotten out. But
True.
I still don't think the size of a hybrid or a full-on wolf would be big enough for some of the stuff that people have told me about.
Oh no. I've lived in different parts of the country. I've been in Indiana for about 25, 26 years since my oldest son was born here, but I also lived in upstate New York for a while, and a friend of mine had a hybrid shepherd wolf. Beautiful dog. And he was big, but he wasn't as big as what I saw. Not nearly as big. Um, this was a large animal, you know. The fact that its body could extend the distance that it did, the way it balanced itself over that ditch as it was eating. I mean, it was huge. It was huge. Enough to make, if that had been just a dog on the side of a road or just even a regular sized wolf, I probably would have been startled by a wolf being there, but I wouldn't have slowed down. I mean, it made me slow down. What am I seeing? I wanted to get a good look at it, but I wasn't going to stop. I mean, I had a child in the back seat. I wasn't, I wouldn't have I didn't want to put myself in danger, you know, but it didn't run off. A coyote, if it was a coyote probably would have run off.
That's
Um,
what I would think too.
yeah, this just reared its head up and looked at me, like it's just completely unfazed by me slowing down and looking at it. But it was striking at the time, so.
The most recent one was about a month or so ago. You said
Mhm.
another vehicle had to have seen it
Yeah, they had to have seen it.
because you said they hit their brakes.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a
So,
stop sign there. It's a four-way stop, but it's like it's an odd. The road's coming to it. One comes at an angle, so it's kind of a wide space. There if you know what I mean.
mhm.
It's not just a solid 90-degree angles. So it's four roads coming together, but one, like the fact that one comes at an angle, it makes it like a bigger intersection. So you're stopping a ways. That car stopped. I think it stopped is my feeling because it slammed on its brakes. It was in the middle of the intersection and it started up and then stopped suddenly to the point that I heard it stop, turned around and saw that creature run across that intersection in that silhouette look with the street lights, And like I said, it wasn't a human. That was no human
How
because
tall do you
humans don't have legs like that.
how tall do you think it was?
Uh, I would say, I'd say, I mean, if I put a man and that's about like a 6-foot man as a reference, I would say 7 feet.
I was
It
trying
was
to
it was
think.
tall.
You said the legs and everything were not a person, but
No,
I've tried to rationalize the thing that I had seen as someone in a werewolf costume before
well,
because
And they had and also the arms were really long.
Okay.
They were like hanging down, and it was that hunched over, like the character in Harry Potter when he turns into the werewolf. He has that hunched over look when he stands on his hind legs, and it scaled that intersection very quickly. But I got a good look at it, a good look of the silhouette of it running, and you know, and I noticed immediately that, gee, my dogs aren't barking at this. This is not normal. They're staying quiet.
I don't remember the exact time frame. I actually believe this was in the 80s,
Hmm.
but someone had come up to one of the events that I was speaking at, and they were talking to me, and they said that it was down off of the highway 18 or not 28.
Hmm.
And I'm pretty sure they said it was an all white wolf run across the road on two legs.
Interesting.
For me, that's like you don't hear all white too often. I had an episode recently about a female that was supposed to be all white, but that's an interesting story. We'll just leave it at that one. But I said I've talked to several people here since I've been trying to find more information regarding this in the surrounding areas. I went to a couple different events where I've spoke about this to try and see if others would come up and talk about it, because there is a lot of weird stuff that goes on around here. And for some reason, I was just as guilty, but no one wants to talk about it.
Right.
I know. Well, there's the stigma to it. I get it.
Yeah. Well, people think, people just want to blow off things they don't understand. And I'm more curious. And, yeah, I know there's more out there there's things out there we don't know about. The world's a big place. I mean, like, there's things down in the ocean that we have no clue about because we don't know what's down there. Same in the sky. I mean, it's, I guess my viewpoint is, like a friend of mine put it one time, people say you have to prove it's real. Well, prove it's not real.
Right.
It's just as hard to do either way. You can't, if somebody says they experienced something, I believe them. Why would you're not going to get anything from lying about it or making things. So I guess people get attention for making things up, but, I just keep an open mind, I guess, about what people tell me, and try to keep an open mind about my experiences. But I'm the first one to sit there and rationalize. I thought, well, there has to be a logical explanation, kind of thing. But there was no logic that can explain what I saw in 2001. It was no coyote, and it was bigger. That was an awful big wolf, and the way that it was like balancing itself, and it was so, its body was the length of that ditch, and or as long as the width of that ditch. It was a pretty big space between, balancing on the edge of that field and getting up to that roadkill on the side of the road like that. And it was just eating. And the fact that it didn't run, like you said, it didn't run, or I said, it didn't run off when I slowed down. It was completely unintimidated by me. Most animals will run off when a car slows down nearby or even goes by. It didn't do that. So
it's almost as if it wasn't afraid. It had no reason to be afraid.
No, it's not intimidated by me at all. It wasn't. I didn't think so at all.
Which in itself is strange, but I talked to a lady back in the summer, and she was from Southern Indiana. And she had said that she had seen a werewolf drinking from a fountain.
Oh, for heaven's sakes. That would be something.
It was drinking the
Oh,
water up out of someone's yard fountain.
wow. Interesting. So it was in somebody's yard.
It was either in a yard or a park, but they drove by, her and her husband, I think, drove by it, or her boyfriend or whatever it was at the time. And they
Jeez.
turned around, I think went back, and it was still there.
Oh, wow.
So, and I think they both saw it.
Hmm.
It's weird, again, when there's been so many different versions of stories and everything about these things having some sort of
Hmm.
supernatural abilities. They're not flesh and blood, they're not here, but then why are they eating? Well, someone says they don't
Well,
actually eat, they just make it themselves see like they do. I was like, well, that doesn't make any sort of sense. Why would you pretend to be eating?
well, I mean, yeah, why would you pretend to be eating? And also, why can't they just be flesh and blood? Why do they have to be something ethereal or esoteric? You know, um,
I think
not that
that
I,
goes back to the fact that there's been no bodies. There's
well,
been
that could
no
be.
there's been no proof of a dead animal. Like no one's actually ran one over unless it walks out in front of me again. Then I'll be the first one that does it. Because I'm said that before. I'm going to run it over, so I have my proof.
So you can get it. Well, if you could, if so just be hope you, if you don't kill it though, it might get kind of angry. Um,
I guess if it gets angry, then I'll know for a few seconds what it was.
yeah, there you go.
I can die with answers.
Well, there is some postings online. There's uh, pictures of supposedly what they say is a Dogman body, and it's like laying on the back of a truck. It's pretty big.
Yeah,
I've seen that.
that is a prop from a movie. Actually,
Oh, is it?
I
Well,
know the person that's made it. He's actually been in a Reddit group that I've been a part of for
oh,
Dogman,
okay.
and
Well,
that is his artwork stuff that they were making for a movie prop, and people
mhm.
used it and stole it, saying it was real when it wasn't.
Oh, okay.
It,
Well,
it looks really good, but
it does.
he's supposedly made all that stuff. He's posted up behind the scene photos of how they made all that stuff. So
Okay. Well, that's disappointing. Well, I just assumed it was real. But yeah, that's true. They haven't found any bodies of it, but do we always find bodies of all of the other animals that die in the wild? I mean, that we don't even see, you know? Um,
if you talk to hunters, and I've done this before, and it might make some of them angry, but I don't really care.
mhm,
When people say these things don't exist because you've never found a body,
mhm.
how often are these hunters that say these things don't exist because they're in the woods all the time? How many times have they ever come across a bear carcass
Right, exactly.
or a mountain lion carcass? I'm
Yeah, they don't.
using I'm using the predator type animals as a thing because it's very rare that you ever hear of someone having that. So where do they
Yeah,
go?
you don't. You don't. Where do they go? I mean, they probably get eaten by, you know, vultures. The carcass just gets consumed by other creatures.
You might run across a random bone here and there, but you're just going to think it's just a normal animal and not think much else about it.
Right, right. So you can't really use that as an explanation. Um, yeah, you can't just write it off because and that with that explanation. That doesn't. Yeah, you're right. You don't come across a cougar carcass. I don't know what happens to them. Well, they deteriorate, they rot. Or they get eaten. That's the nature of the
Yeah.
wild. Things get eaten.
There's so
Um,
much out there that we don't know about that could be,
right.
again, even if you're just walking, how often do you ever just come across a skeleton or a carcass of any animal? You don't.
Exactly. You don't. You don't. You know. Um, especially if you're in town, you might see roadkill, you might see a squirrel that's been hit by a car, but you know, they don't just stay there. Well, the city comes and cleans them up usually. Um, but one thing, and I've thought about too, is you kind of getting away from that aspect of it is the Michigan encounters. I mean, Michigan seems to be just dense with it. Um, as far as the Dogmen. And but it makes sense that they'd be up there. There's so much, more open country up there, especially when you go up north.
That
And
that's where they originated from with the term Dogman, because I think in the
Mhm.
1980s they had that song, and it was talking about a dog man. It was around Halloween time. It was kind of a joke, and people started calling into the radio station reporting seeing these things.
Mm-hmm.
So the people that did it as a joke, but apparently there was actually people out there that were like, no, I've been seeing this stuff. I'm glad someone said something about it.
Yeah. Well,
And
probably maybe it was originated as a joke, but that could be the joke kind of got inspired by what people had seen.
right.
But there's no reason to believe that they're just going to stay in Michigan and not come down into Indiana. We're not that far away. Um,
The Native Americans around the country have different variations of their old supernatural legends or whatever you want to call the lores. Like
right.
they had Wendigos more. I think
Mhm.
I don't know if it's a Cree thing, so I don't want to start picking things apart, but I know like skinwalkers is a term that the Navajos use for like when
Right. Yeah.
their medicine men, witch doctors, or whatever you want to call them, would turn into
Mhm.
these things.
Right.
Why
Right.
were they talking about stuff like that though?
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a good question.
What started those stories from the Native Americans?
Mm-hmm.
Something had to influence that. And I've said this about all sorts of lores when it comes to the old stories. Like,
Mm-hmm.
why were people talking about werewolves in Europe 1,000 years ago?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, those stories are
Yeah.
not just modern. Like, those have been around for a long time.
Right. Well, I think myths are, they're not untrue. They're based on people's experiences. They're based on real events or real experiences that people had. I don't, I give a lot of credibility to myths and legends and stories and, yeah,
There's a
it's not,
couple, there's a couple things that I've tried to bring up here and there every once in a while to people that have had these experiences and try to look into things.
hmm
Like, look at the old Grimm fairy tales for the most part. What was
oh, yeah,
what was one of the main bad guys of those stories? The big bad wolf.
right. The big bad wolf. Yeah, exactly.
What
hmm
in the
hmm
story of Red Riding Hood, what
hmm
did the big bad wolf do? Well, he impersonated a person. He ate
Right,
grandma and dressed like her.
right, right.
So that's a wolf that can wear people's clothing, and so that's like
hmm
a werewolf.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you had the three little pigs.
The wolves. Yeah,
The wolf was the bad guy in that, and he would
right,
huff and puff and blow their house down. He'd go on to the next one. But one of the things that he said was, little pig, let me in. And I've heard
right.
another interview, and I don't know where it was, but someone said this thing was tapping on the window and telling him to
hmm
let it in.
Right.
The let it in thing for me sounds very much demonic in a sense, or vampire like, because you
Right.
have to invite it in. If something's that big and it's out there and it wants to come in, why couldn't it just bust through the window?
Right. That's true. Yeah, that is a good question. And I've listened to some encounters where people say they were tapped on the window. Yeah, that would freak me out. But um, yeah, because then you're not safe in your own space. Even you don't feel that threatens your own safety, and it intimidates you. Um,
Other people have tried to say, well, they don't understand how doors and windows actually are. Well, if they're
hmm
smart enough to tap on the window,
hmm
I'm sure they can know it breaks, especially if it's has the ability to telepathically tell you to let it in.
hmm hmm
So to me,
Yeah.
like, that's where I start to wonder with the whole flesh and blood aspect to it. Like, if it has those abilities, I don't
hmm
necessarily think it's just a normal animal, because biologically it doesn't make any sort of sense as to how it could be anyways. And then you start adding
Yeah.
in those supernatural elements of mind speak and everything else. To me, then you're starting to
hmm
get into that whole woo factor over here, to where it's
Right.
kind of
Right.
A little strange.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I didn't have that kind of encounter with what I saw. I didn't feel, I mean, I didn't feel like I was being communicated to on a psychic level. Um, you know, I mean, I probably have more psychic connection with my own dogs, but that's just because I know them. But yeah, I didn't have that experience. And you do hear people say they have that experience that they, they had the sense of fear before they even saw anything. Um, and that is interesting. So yeah, but the creature that I saw was eating. It's just so. I mean, maybe they could the whole parallel universe thing. They could have
Interdimensional.
right interdimensional in this dimension though. But while they're here, they have to eat, right?
Mm.
So they still have to eat.
What if
Just
they
like
come here to eat?
could be that could be. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of questions, and again, I don't have any answers. I'm just a
Hmm.
guy with a microphone, but
But
I try
well,
and search for things. Like I said, I'm searching for a truth. That's why I do what I do. I don't know if I'll ever find it or
yeah.
not, but it's what I'm out here doing.
Well, yeah, that's what I do every day. Try to find out what the truth of things is in a lot of aspects of our lives, trying to find out what the truth is. There's so much that we humans don't know. Um, Even those of us who try to find out things, to find out what the truth is. There's always something you don't know. Um,
That's probably by design.
yeah, by design. Um, but yeah, I do believe there's things out there. I do, and I've what I saw was not normal. Call it weird. It was just not normal. It's not what we're accustomed to seeing, you know. Um, and each time the two, the first, I mean, people call them encounters. They're not like they're encounters, and I don't feel like I encountered them. I saw them. I didn't have
You're
a
an
face to
eyewitness to
face.
something.
Right. I didn't, an encounter to me is walking through the woods and coming around a bend, and there it is. I mean, it's right in front of you. That's an encounter. Uh, the people that have been, some people have been terrorized by these things. Like you said, banging on the windows or even, you know, threatening them. Um, some real negative experiences, but then some people, they see them and you know, they're not, they're afraid, but they're not harmed or, directly threatened by the creature in any way. But some people really have been. And I kind of wonder why they had those kind of experiences. So, and that's another thing too. There's different personalities to these creatures. Um, some of them just mind their own business. They see people and then they don't threaten them at all, and then they just go away. But then some people are actually feel like they're hunted by them, and so there's different personalities in these creatures. Um, not so nice, and some they just don't really bother you. And
And that can be
same,
just like people too.
true. And you hear the same thing about Sasquatch.
Right.
There are some Sasquatch that are really very, frightening, and some, but for the most part, they're not. Um, you know, um, I can't say either way. The ones I saw, if the ones I saw, what they were like. Um, the one that was eating, if I had been not in a car, I don't think I would have felt very safe. For one thing, it was eating. I mean, any wild animal who's eating, you don't want to bother them. That's not a good time to be around them, because they're going to feel threatened that you're going to take their food away. Um, so,
Did that
but
one have pointed ears?
it did
Okay.
kind of like a wolf, not as big as I've had a shepherd mix that had the pointed ears, not as big as a shepherd's ears as far as in relation to its head. You know what I mean? It was more like lower pointed ears. But then there was a lot of fur around it too. So
Like a
just had a
chow.
lot of fur. Yeah, kind of had the chow like look about it. And the shepherd mix that I had was a shepherd chow mix. Great dog. She was the best dog ever that I acquired, and she had more shepherd type ears, but she had a lot of fur around her face, but not quite as much as the full-blooded chow. But yeah, what I saw had that chow fur around the face, around the head, rather, not the face, but the head.
The
And it
thing
had
that I saw looked like a large black wolf, but it had very puffy fur like a chow dog.
Yeah, that's what this one looked like. It wasn't black though; it was more gray, kind of grayish, like not it had like there was different colors mixed into the
Right.
gray, you know.
No.
Yeah, and it was beautiful in a way. It was really pretty. So, but then I love animals, so um, but yeah, the teeth were. I mean, it was baring its teeth at me because it was in the middle of eating. I didn't think it was trying to frighten me. Its mouth was open. It had whatever it was eating in its mouth, and there was,
Was its eyes reflecting the lights?
that I can't remember. I don't remember that as much. I mean, it just looked at me. Its eyes were dark.
Okay.
You hear about those red eyes or the yellow eyes. It wasn't like that. They were just kind of dark. Just that didn't no.
Okay.
I couldn't say that.
So usually you always hear about the glowing eyes, and
Yeah.
even the thing I saw, its eyes, I say they weren't glowing. They were, but they weren't because my headlights were shining on it. The guy with me's headlights were shining on it. So there's two
and
sets
plus,
of headlights shining.
And plus, it was daylight. It wasn't dark.
Okay.
So it was morning light. So
in broad daylight, you basically got a better look at it than what anyone else would have gotten anyways, because it's in daylight. And that's the thing that, for coyote purposes, kind of eliminates that, in my opinion, because they're nocturnal.
Yeah.
They're more out during the night rather than the day.
Right. Well, this was morning.
Yeah. So,
early morning, and it was, the sun had, was up, and I was driving away from the sun. So, but the day was clear, but springtime, it rains the day before, and then the next day it's clear, but there's still that dampness and that hovering of that mist over the fields. That's what I remember seeing. I remember that very distinctly. And but the daylight, it was a clear morning, and it was out in broad daylight, just having breakfast on the side of the road, and it was huge, just huge.
Ever since that day, though, it's kind of changed your perspective, hasn't it?
Yes, I would say so.
Yeah, I don't understand how it does it for everyone else. I just know for me personally, and from other people that I've talked to, like, it's almost like an awakening that there's something out there, and we don't really know what it is.
Right, that we don't know what it is. And I just kind of accepted I wasn't going to find anybody who could tell me anything. I tried to find somebody to give me information that I thought might know, and it was just kind of blown off. And he didn't, wasn't rude about it. He just, it's just a coyote, it's nothing, and I said, it wasn't a coyote. But it was when I started listening to Dogman encounters and other podcasts, but mainly Dogman encounters, that I thought, well, that's what I saw. It was the first time I listened to it. I don't know how I came across it. I wasn't looking for it. It just came up on, something. I was watching something else on YouTube, I think, and there it was. And I thought, what's that? And so I listened to it, and then and I thought, well, that's exactly what I saw.
I come
and
across
then I went
Vic's show because someone reached out to me because someone from my area had an encounter. So I listened to that episode, and that's how I got in contact with Vic. But that is one of those things, again, like one of the area that person had their experience at, I also have on my map, which is also in the same general areas. So the other things around
Right.
here, like I said, so there's like
Yeah.
4 or 5 different events that have happened, at least in my close proximity,
Mm-hmm.
in
And
the
like I said,
same general
I
area.
I wish I could find the website. And I'm almost certain I found it through the Dogman Encounters website, where there was like a map and it was a national map, and it had like the little marks on the map to tell you where people had reported Dogman, and there were a few in Indiana. And the one and you click on it and it tells you where it's at, and it was in Forest, and Forest is just outside of Frankfurt. It's a little dinky, you know, there's not even a stop sign there. It's a what do you call that kind of town, like a grain elevator town,
Mm-hmm.
and there's nothing there. But there's one, they say, there. And I thought, well, has at some point in time, there had been an encounter reported there. And that's just real close to Frankfurt. So I thought, well, there's no reason why what I saw isn't a Dogman. Um, I'm sure they get around. They're going to move around. They're not going to just stay in one place. Um, and if you look at that field, beyond that field, there's a lot of trees in the bed. Beyond the field, there's some areas of trees, so they could hide out in there. There's water sources not far away. I mean, all those things that would attract them to that area, and plenty of wildlife um, that they could eat. So it just makes sense
Right.
that they'd be there. And the same with around Frankfurt. There's a lot of farmland around us, but there are a lot of wooded areas nearby, and there's plenty of water. The Wabash River, Prairie Creek runs through town. There's plenty of things, and there's plenty of wildlife right here in town. Squirrels, there's raccoons, possums, all the time.
How far were
They
you
just,
from the river where this thing was?
uh, the first time,
Both.
yeah, well, there's um, Prairie Creek runs right where I saw where the car stopped.
Mm-hmm.
There's a little park beyond there, and there's a dog park back there too, where I take my dogs. And there's a creek that runs right there. It's
Okay.
right there, right by that road, right by the intersection. Um, and that runs all the way through town. As far as Mulberry, I know I want to say, is it Sugar Creek runs through there? I can't remember. There is a creek back beyond those fields, though. I can't remember which one it is. Of course, the Wabash River is all along there. It's typically, um, yeah, the Wabash River's around in there. I'd have to look at a map to tell you, but there's water all around there.
If you
Um,
happen to get a chance,
hmm
and you can pinpoint it on a map, you can email that to me, because again, I'm taking all these locations. I'm doing the whole little conspiracy
Sure.
crazy person here, but I'm doing the
hmm
cork board with the little red lines, and I'm mapping
Yeah,
out everything.
yeah, I could do that. Yeah, figure out how to get a map up, and yeah, I could do that. And the first one I saw really wasn't in Frankfurt. It was more in Mulberry. If you know where Mulberry is. Mulberry is
I know the name. I would have to look on my maps
yeah,
to figure out where it's
Mulberry
at.
is basically between Frankfurt and uh,
Lafayette.
yeah.
Hmm.
Mhm.
I was just down through there not long ago, so I had to go to Crawfordsville. So I was at one of those conventions they had going on down there.
Mhm.
So I just drove through that area recently, and I had
Right.
some work stuff in Frankfurt not long ago. So I've been in Frankfurt not too long
Yeah,
back.
yeah. And and Crawfordsville's not far west
Right.
of here.
Hmm.
Yeah, not far at all. Um,
Well, I was going to say, if you have anything else we can talk about, but if not, we can probably wrap this one up. We've been going on for a little
okay.
over an hour.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like we pretty much covered it. Yeah. I just had the two experiences, but
Mm-hmm.
so
Well, I
I hope I
appreciate
hope I
you.
I hope I've been helpful.
Oh, you have. I definitely appreciate talking with you. I'm always
Yeah,
glad to hear from a fellow Hoosier, especially one that's not that far away.
yeah, yeah. It happened. Yeah, and I was. That's why I think you must. I don't know. Were you interviewed by Vic?
I was on Vic's show because
That's how I heard. Yeah.
I reached out to Vic originally because I was trying to figure out if he had any information, if he could relay my information to the guy that he'd interviewed that was in Peru.
Right.
And he didn't, but he asked if I wanted to come on the show because maybe that guy would listen and reach out. So I've still
Mhm.
never heard from that guy because I would love to talk
Really?
to him.
Yeah. That's too bad.
Like, I don't even care
But
if it's
yeah.
for an interview for the show. I just want to hear
Yeah.
his experience in person and kind of figure out exactly where it was. And
Yeah, and I was
because,
intrigued because you said Peru. You told your stories about Peru. I thought, well, geez, that's not that far from here.
right,
And it validates, it helps to validate your own experience when you know people near in the general area are also having those experiences. So you're not crazy, you know. Um,
I might be crazy, but I'm not crazy about that.
no, yeah, but you know what I mean. Yeah.
Right.
But and I feel bad for a lot of people out there who do see these things and they tell their family members, and Vic talks a lot about this too, how they tell them, oh, you're seeing things, or they just, tell them they're crazy. And that's, you know,
I
terrible.
believe most people that I talked about originally, because I didn't say a whole lot, but I had family members laugh. At the time, I still lived
Yeah.
at my parents' house. They laughed about it because they didn't think it was real. And I've had other people not say anything. I've
Mhm.
told a couple people about it and they laughed about it. The coworker didn't want anything to do with it. So it's
Yeah.
like you write it off in your mind because the people that you think should be there to believe you and support you typically don't. So then you
Typically
start
don't.
to
Yeah.
question yourself.
Right. Right. Well, fortunately, the main people in my life are my sons, and they do listen to me, and they don't discount me.
Hmm.
And my oldest son is an engineer, and he's very analytical. Um, so, he's kind of probably of the opinion that, well, if I see it, then I'll believe you, but I'm not going to say that you are seeing things. So he's not telling me I'm crazy, but you know, he wants to have proof too. But well, you weren't there, so you can't. You're just going to have to believe me. So,
Right. It's hard to
um,
prove anything, especially as much as we would like to. When someone sees something that's all you get to hear, that the proof is their story. So
right,
it's
right.
hard to prove anything based off that. Like I don't think people are lying,
No,
but
and you can't. People say, well, why don't they take pictures in this day and age? Everybody has a phone. You can take. Well, for one thing, in 2001, I had a flip phone. It didn't take pictures. Um, and I wouldn't have even, the thought of stopping and taking a picture doesn't even enter my mind. I
right.
wouldn't have entered my mind. And as far as what I saw in September running across the road, well, there's no way I would have gotten that in a picture. I couldn't have gotten the phone up fast enough to get a picture. And I'm also, I don't always carry my phone with me. Maybe, some people find that crazy, but I'm old enough that it's not permanently attached to my hip. You know what I mean? Um,
Hmm.
I'm using the phone to talk to you right now because, frankly, I need a new laptop, and my desktop is would be just too inconvenient to use. Um, so I have to use my phone for this, but I'm not the type to carry my phone around with me all the time. So, I will go out at night, walk my dogs without my phone. And maybe some people say, well, what if something happens, but, well, I'm taking my chances. I guess there was a time when we didn't have phones and we took our dogs for walks without them. So, uh, but even if I'd had it, I couldn't have gotten that picture of anything. It was gone, you know. Um, and I'm not going to chase after it to get a picture, you know. That
Yeah.
would be that could be dangerous.
Right. I don't
Trying to
encourage anyone to go after them. I'm
no, no.
Me and the people that are going to go out and film with me, we're dumb enough to go after it. I actually had this conversation with one of my friends that's going to be doing the video portions, and he said, "What happens if we actually find something?" I was like, "Well, then we'll worry about that when it happens."
When it
So
happens, yeah.
I don't have
I,
a plan. I don't honestly expect to find anything, to be honest. But if I guess it's the random case that we do, then I guess we
yeah,
will figure that out, and
yeah.
just don't be the slowest person.
Right, right. Make sure you can run. And I probably would be intrigued to do something like that as a group. I would be willing to do that. If I had a group of people, that would be interesting to me. And, but to go out by myself and hunt for them, no, I'm not going to do that. You
I,
know?
I'm going to take a few people out, but
Hmm.
when it comes time to actually do what I'm planning on doing, I'm not going out with a bunch of people, because you're never going to find something if you have a lot of people with you, because there's
No,
too much
no.
noise, too much stuff. So if I do
Right,
something, it's
right,
going to be with me, a camera person, and maybe one other person, if that.
right.
So
Yeah. And I wouldn't feel afraid to do that at all. You know,
uh,
you're not alone. But
no,
no, but to go out by myself and just hunt for dogmen, and no, I'm not gonna.
I'm not
But
necessarily just hunting for Dogman. I'm hunting for all the weird stuff, because there's a
all the
lot of
things,
weird.
yeah,
Yeah, there's a
yeah,
lot of weird stuff around here. So for me, I'm
yeah,
going out for all the weird stuff.
right, right. Well, yeah, but yeah, and that would be fun. You don't know what you might come across. And I do think there's some truth to the fact that if you're looking for it, it will find you. You know, um, I do think there's something to that. I think whatever dogmen, Sasquatch, whatever, not that they're trying to be harmful, but um, they're probably, I think they do pick up on, you know, your interest. Um, it's just like animals that are in need of help. They're going to go to people that they know what people to go to.
Right.
You know what I mean? They're going to go to those people and ask for their help. You know, um, like the shepherd chow mix that I had was not being well cared for, and it pretty much came to me and became my dog. You know, um, so I think there's something to that too. So well, it's very interesting. It's been fun talking about it, and it you know makes me feel validated in a way. So yeah,
I'm glad I could give you some validation. Like I
yeah,
said, I do the show just for the sake of allowing people for a chance to talk, because I know what it was like
hmm
never been able to do that.
yeah, yeah. I mean, like I said, I can talk to my kids, but I don't talk to my coworkers. I never tell them. I have one friend I've told, a neighbor. He's pretty open minded, and he's intrigued by it. Yes, and I've talked to him about it. So
I've told a few
that's
coworkers, and I think they think I'm probably a lunatic at this point, but it is what it
Mhm.
is. I know there's a
Yeah,
couple of them that still listen to the show too, so
yeah. Well, there you go. Yeah,
it's always weird when your work finds out you do stuff like this, and you go out and do all stuff like that. 'Cause you never know how they're going to interpret it, but so far
right.
no one said anything to me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they're not doing any harm, so
Right.
yeah. And who knows? They might encounter something, and then you'll be somebody they can talk to. So I think there's things out there, and I listen to the Dogman encounters frequently, and not all the time. Sometimes I take a break from it because, well, sometimes I just don't have time. And but it's very interesting to me. Yeah, I feel bad for the people that are so terribly frightened by it or have a terrible experience. That's pretty awful. But yeah, so
Well, Jeanette,
okay,
it's been a pleasure talking with you.
it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you. You have a good
Okay,
night.
you too. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
And that's the show, everyone. I really hope you guys enjoyed the conversations. If you would like to be a guest on Tinfoil Tales, remember to send an email to tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com or go to the contact section of tinfoiltales.com. Just get your message to me. We'll get something scheduled for a future episode. And just remember, the truth lies in the stories we share, the connections we make. Stay curious, stay open-minded. Thank you all for joining us on this journey. And until next time, keep questioning, keep seeking, and keep exploring the unknown. Good night, everyone.
Tinfoil Tales in the headphones. Yeah, it's time to rock. Got a story about a cryptic creature. Let's take a walk. Bigfoot, Dogman, they're out there in the dark. But the truth is out there like an alien spark. UFO sightings got the whole world shook. Conspiracies unfold like a story in a book. Media control, trying to keep us blind. But I won't be fooled, gonna use my whole mind. In history, they don't want us to know the secrets they hide, the truth they won't show. Dominate our society, they keep us in chains. But I'm standing tall, it's time to break the reins. Control, trying to keep us blind. But I won't be fooled, gonna use my own mind. In history